Hi, I'm Dr. Stan Steindl, and welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt. Now and then, someone comes along who quietly but consistently creates a space that becomes a refuge, a meeting place, and a source of inspiration. For over 8 years, Chris Winson has been that person for the global compassion community. As founder of the hashtag 365 Days of Compassion, Chris helped build a digital home for compassion-focused therapists, researchers, and fellow travellers. First on Twitter, and later through a thriving Facebook group. He shared daily posts, monthly roundups, articles, songs, memes, and heartfelt reflections. His work became a safe haven and secure base for so many of us navigating the often challenging world of social media. Now, after an incredible run, Chris is winding down his regular postings, and today's conversation is a celebration and deep appreciation of all that he's given. We reflect on the journey, the highs and lows, and what compassion has meant to him along the way. And so I bring you Chris Winson. Well, Chris Winson, welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt.
Hey, Stan. Absolute privilege to be here. Thank you very much for the invite.
Well, I feel honoured to have you on as well. Actually, I'm really looking forward to having our chat about the hashtag 365 Days of Compassion and your sort of role in all of that. And I guess I wondered if we could if you can take us back to the beginning. What was the inspiration there, and what actually kicked it off, I suppose, and why Twitter of all places?
Yeah, indeed. Why Twitter? So I think there's two little stories to tell here. So before the main part, which is about the hashtag, we just perhaps have to go back a little bit. A bit like, if you're going to read Lord of the Rings, you need to read The Hobbit first.
Yes.
And that's not bad going, is it, to get a Tolkien reference in within the first minute?
The first minute.
I've achieved everything now I wanted to in this interview. So the kind of the prequel to it, and it's important, I think, just to understand this piece. So I have to take you back to the December 2016. I was sat with the GP early December, and I was being diagnosed with quite severe depression, and he was signing me off work and various things, and we talked about therapy. Now, at the time, I was quite a senior. I had quite a senior leadership role in a technology company. And so I was quite lucky to have access to therapy quite early through a private clinician offering. And so in February of 2017, I was sat with a therapist, Nikki, who was brilliant. And she introduced CFT to me. Not in that she went, oh, let's do CFT. I was very lucky with her approach. She took a very holistic view. There's bits of ACT, there's CBT. But the thing that she identified for me that might be helpful was the three circles model. So for those watching who are not fully aware of that, in terms of the threat, drive, and soothing system. And it made sense. I often jokingly say that, a ray of sunlight hit my face and angelic choir in the background, but I'm sure it wasn't quite like that. Wow. So it helped, and we explored that over a few sessions. And in April of that year, so I've been in therapy for a couple of months. The World Health Organization's Health Day was about depression, and so I wrote a little blog on Facebook, because a lot of friends didn't know why I was off work. And I decided to share this piece about suffering from depression. And I was blown away by the reaction to that by some of the friends. A lot of people were very surprised, because I was very good at masking it, that I got depression. And Nikki then did that little thing that all you therapists do very well, which is give me another little nudge. And she went, oh, that's really good what you've written. Why don't you write a blog? And so I started my personal blog. And what I'd also done was I'd started to use Twitter at this stage. And through Nikki, I'd connected with a few people, a few other therapists and stuff. And I'd also found something called the Blurt Foundation, which is a UK-based charity around depression. There's quite a few of them. But despite all the things about Twitter, it was actually quite a supportive environment if you're very careful about who you follow. And so Nikki gave me one of those nudges about, why don't you share the blog on Twitter, which was quite a big step. But I did, and the support was really good. So I was finding that very supportive, and I carried on writing. So I had found Twitter to be quite a useful way of connecting with people and finding some resources. So it was through Twitter that I discovered Mary Welford, for example, because I'd connected with Jim Lucas, who was a friend of Nikki. He did a podcast. Mary was on it talking about CFT. And that's how you just connected. So there was this kind of organic growth that I'd found of doing that. And so later that year, in December of 2017, Mary decided that she was going to do what was actually called the Advent of Compassion. So she had this idea she was going to post something daily in December as an advent calendar. And halfway through December, I think she invited anyone else to join in. And I thought, oh, this is great. I love this. This is really helpful. So we continued doing that. And towards the end of December, I then thought, well, I really enjoyed doing this. And in the same kind of thing that then fed also into it was the Blurt Foundation used to do this thing called 365 Days of Self-Care, which is where people would sometimes, they post, oh, today's a bad day, and they'd get peer support. But it wasn't just about that as well. They'd also share things that were happening that were good. It wasn't just always about, I need some help. And I thought, well, why don't you put the two together? Why don't we take this idea of Mary's, the Advent of Compassion, and take this thing of doing something 365 days across the year? I'm laughing because I kind of thought it would fizzle out by January. I put them together, and that's how the hashtag came about. So it's kind of this growth from finding my own kind of connections on Twitter from that early stage of writing the blog and people connecting through that, leading on to connecting with the likes of Mary, and then this thing that arose. And then, I launched it in January. So January 18 was the first one. And I genuinely didn't think, I didn't know how long it was going to last. And it only had a simple idea. The simple idea was just do a daily post of something that would have a compassionate message, would have compassion at the heart of it. Something that might encourage somebody that might support them, give them some information. And it came with that whole kind of ethos of doing, being helpful, not harmful. So we didn't want, political messages or stuff like that. It was about how can we do something that might be supportive for people. Being slightly organised as I am, kind of for my characteristics, I gave myself some little rules around it, which were Sunday was a podcast. So because podcasts were very important to me, I'd listen to yourself and James in the dynamic duo, as I called you, your podcast series. There was Jim's, Ross McIntosh's People Super thing had come along by then. It started. So I found podcasts very useful. So they were Sundays. Monday was usually a book quote by various authors that I like, particularly Tolkien and Pratchett. And music was, and Friday was my music, which was just an excuse to share my random 80s music collection. So that's how it kind of started. The other thing about Twitter was it allowed everyone on Twitter to kind of access those and to comment on it and to share. And people did. That was one of the surprising things, actually. People often comment on it. Oh, this post resonated with me, and then somebody else might comment why, and big connection. But one thing I was very conscious of was not that many people, not everyone used Twitter. And I'd like to have been available a little bit wider than that. So Twitter at the time did something called Moments, where you could collect a series of tweets together. And so I used to create daily moments and then share them off Twitter to Facebook and other places. But that worked pretty well. But then I also decided, because I don't know, it sounds like there was always a plan, but there wasn't. These things have just kind of evolved. I wanted to collect them also into a kind of weekly thing, which I called the review. And then so I created that, which was an online tool that created like a newspaper. So that's kind of where I'm very conscious I'm rambling on here. There's quite a lot that then followed on from it.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah, I mean, I was just really soaking it up because it's sort of, I don't know, a feeling of nostalgia was really just sort of rising up for me. You know, like I was trying to think when I literally first came across it, but it was early on and so on. And
you were early on because I was trying to think about that actually. And I can only remember all of this because I wrote a reflection at the end of each year about the hashtag.
Yeah.
If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't remember half of this. So, because I have an awful memory. I think you were quite early on because when I was as I said, when I first started the therapy with Nikki, and I first started kind of using Twitter to connect to people, I connected with a few people that she had. So Jim Lucas, Joe Oliver, Richard Bennett. So they're more in the kind of ACT world. But I'd read 2 books when I was in kind of started off with Nikki because I am quite a logical person. I am by training a kind of project manager, program manager. So I kind of wanted a plan. You know, when I was sat there with Nikki, I was like, "How many sessions are we having?" She said, "I don't know." And I was like, "Yeah, but I'm here. How do I get to?" And I soon learned that was not how it works. But I started to go around and read stuff. So this is when I read Paul's book. In fact, I read a couple of Paul's books. Mindful Compassion was the first one.
Right.
But I also read Activate Your Life by John Hill, Joe Oliver, and Eric Morris.
Ah, yes, Eric.
It's a really light ACT book. It doesn't go into the matrix and stuff, and it's quite funny in parts as well. There's some very dry humour in it, which I liked. So I connected with that, and I called that, and I called that group, which included your good friend James Kirby as well, as my compassionate Yodas. There was about 7, and then that compassionate Yoda group started to expand, and I think you were then quite one of the ones that started to come in that because I connected to James, and I think I then connected to you via that, and I think it was through I think James probably shared possibly one of the podcasts that you guys were doing at the time.
Right. Yeah.
And that's possibly right. But I don't know. And one thing is I love about that is I don't know, but it's very nice.
Yeah.
Because it's organically grown.
I feel the same way. It's hard to sort of exactly pin down the genesis, perhaps, of these things, but that's something that's really special about it is that it was so organic and there were such wonderful connections made. I mean, I sort of, in listening to your story, it's creativity and connection seem to be 2 really big parts of it for you. You came from that very project management, kind of having a plan type world, but you really sort of dove into the world of creativity and connection and just organic things started. I mean, you had definitely a planning side to you by the sounds of it, but there was a real organicness to it, and just in the way that it kind of grew rather exponentially, really, from there in terms of just the many and varied connections that were made. I was reflecting on it, and it's a bit of a CFT and an attachment theory idea, I guess. But you kind of created a safe haven and secure base really, in a way, for people
Yeah.
interested in compassion, interested in self-compassion, CFT, but beyond that as well. And because it can be tricky on social media to sort of feel that. And I don't know, what do you think there? This notion of the hashtag being a bit of a safe haven, secure base for us all.
It's interesting that, because I mean, if you ask me now, would I be going on to Twitter to create that? I probably would say no. And even back then, Twitter was not. It had elements that weren't great. And I should say that obviously the hashtag, although we've talked about Twitter, hashtag was across different platforms. It was Facebook, Instagram, often on Instagram. But Twitter was the one where there was a connection. But it's strange because you know, around the hashtag, I saw elements on Twitter that weren't great. There was a lot of discussion in the UK at that time around mental health, antidepressants, and you got very polarised discussions. And one thing I found on social media was be very careful about who I followed and what I was looking at. So I was always quite keen that the hashtag or anything connected to the hashtag would have, what's the word? I don't want to say unwritten rules, but it had kind of a framework around it where it was always aimed to be supportive. It was that, as I said earlier, it's that ethos of always wanting to be helpful, not harmful. So, so I think it goes back, part of that reason people talked about as a safe haven, and that really came out during the first year. Because when I look back at that blog that I did about the first year, the community thing I'd written was a surprise that I could create. That was not been an intention to create a community. That had all happened organically. And I think the reason that partly happened was that people did feel that it was a safe environment. So if you did post on there, you weren't going to get somebody going, or making some comment. It was all about supportive. So if somebody did post something as a response to it, you would get people being supportive, saying, "Oh, that's how I feel," or "Have you tried this?" And I think that aim of it trying to be somewhere where it would encourage people or support people, I think partly provided that. I was quite protective sometimes of the hashtag, so I would only, after the first year, because the first year I did primarily on my personal Twitter account, from second year onwards, it also had the hashtag had its own Twitter account. So I would only retweet anything on the hashtag that was suitable. When I sound like I'm policing it, but it was just occasionally somebody might just pick the hashtag up and put something that wasn't, they just randomly found the hashtag and used it. So I wouldn't retweet that. And I did sometimes get, if I always felt a little bit protective around the hashtag, and in that respect. We had it on Facebook a couple of years ago, and the Facebook group, we suddenly got to get quite a lot of spam messages being put on there. The ones where it's like the videos of, "Have you seen who's died?" or whatever, and it was getting quite monotonous. And I did ask the group about this, but we switched it to a private group, which had some downsides. But again, to me, that safety element was key to I don't want people seeing that kind of stuff going through all the time. I think the other thing is connected to that is that I think people seem like, or I hope, we never, there's nothing being sold by the hashtag. Yeah. We occasionally people might do work, like they've got a workshop coming up. That was fine, but there was nothing ever being sold. There's no, anybody could come and go. And I used to notice this about the hashtag. You would see people get engaged for quite a little while, and then they might fade away, and that's fine. People ebb and flow within it as well. But I think I hope people kind of recognise that nothing was being pushed. I was just sharing that CFT helped me. It might not help. Some people might find it's not what they want. So I think I like to think those are the kind of reasons why people have felt that it was this safe haven or a safe place. It's one of the reasons, just to finish on that, it's one of the reasons why there's a song by the English, the UK band James. So James, I'm a big fan of James. I've been following him since the late 80s. So I've kind of been with me all my adult life, kind of grown up with them. And a lot of their songs reflect various themes. But one of their songs, very early one, is "Sit Down," which was a kind of big anthem of the late 80s, early 90s. But the words of that, I think, sum up, which is why I shared it when I kind of announced that the hashtag was kind of, I don't want to say closing, but wasn't going to continue as it was. Because the lyrics of that, to me, reflect that safe haven. It was people to sit down together. The lyrics about those who are touched by sadness, those in pain and grief, those who find themselves ridiculous, which I think is a fantastic CFT kind of topic. That reflects to me that safe haven, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, there was definitely a real feeling of welcome and once you're there, a sense of belonging, and there was more than one time where that would be where I would go or turn to if something else, perhaps didn't go quite so well, because it is a funny place on social media, and you do get very negative comments sometimes on things that you put out there or post, and more than once I turn to the community or to someone in the community just to bounce it off with someone, and they were always very validating and encouraging and kind. It's sort of you managed to create a real feeling. And I think one of the ways that you did it too was how the way that you did sort of really share and promote others. I think really, like for example, the reviews that you were mentioning before. I mean, that was you really sort of promoting and profiling others and the work of others, or even just the posts or tweets or words of others, or things that people in the community were doing, and it created a real it really aided in that sense, I think, of belonging, and it was a sort of beloved part of the work as well. I mean, what did you enjoy most about perhaps curating those collections of articles and music and the memes and other reflections?
That's an interesting thing, because so looking back, I can't remember quite what sparked. I think what sparked the review off was this idea of I think there were two reasons for it. One was when you're doing daily posts, sometimes people miss them and stuff like that. So it was kind of like this idea of this weekend paper, magazine to read it, and just that it provided access to people off Twitter. So I used to share it. Obviously, I shared it to the CMF group every weekend as well. So it got a wider audience than just in terms of the direct hashtag. I quite liked it. It's interesting. You earlier just talked about creativity. So I used to always. I didn't really think I'm particularly creative. As far I don't still really think I'm particularly creative. I'm more logical. But one thing that the hashtag and writing my own blog perhaps led into was this touching into creativity. Because when I wrote the blog, and it's funny when I look back on my personal blog, which I don't write anymore, but it was important to me at a certain time, and then it started to, I think you change how you see things. But when you look back on that, initially it's all about my experience of CFT, and then it starts to change into the how do I share about CFT? And so there are things like, there was the doing things, writing kind of like, why is self-compassion like running in a lobster suit, which is still one of my favourite blog posts. But or CMF as a musical sound system, how do you do that? So creative. And you mentioned earlier the memes, so that was something, yourself, Dennis Tersh, Shelley Cook, you'd put stuff on Twitter, a little thought. And I said, these are brilliant, but how do I get these off Twitter? And then I started to create the memes, which was take an image, take what your words put into my head, try and find an image, put the words together and put it as a meme. And so the review captured that, and I used to, in certain respects, I kind of did enjoy doing that, the review, because it brought these elements together. It brought them. It's just hit me a little bit what you said earlier about the sharing of others' work, because one of the things that was, I suppose, a driver to CFT for this was, for the hashtag and for the review, was that I'd found CFT really helpful. I wasn't trying to sell it to anybody. I'm just trying to share, this is my experience. That's why I wrote the blogs. But I was also very conscious of how the resources that I'd found that had helped me might be useful. So the podcast and stuff. And yeah, it was an idea, I guess, of saying, well, I found this useful, you might as well. And that the review was a nice way of collecting it, because the review allowed a library, I guess, of them to build up as well. It originally started on a platform which now is defunct, called Playful, I think it was, which was a free thing, but they wanted to move to a charging model. And I always said one thing about the hashtag was there would never be any, it should never feel like work. It should never feel like, and there would be never any payment whatsoever associated to it. So I then switched to Flipboard, and that worked quite well as a nice magazine. So I think what I enjoyed about the review was it would bring stuff together. It would make me look back over the week as well, because the hashtag also sustained me. That was one of the other things, and that doing it was positive, and it just allowed it to be shared. But yeah, I used to, it was just nice to bring it all together like that.
Yeah, no, it's an incredible resource.
It just had to. It's funny, the review again, that kind of evolved into something, and actually became a big thing about the hashtag, which I don't know. It still takes me back that it did, but it became an important thing. Particularly like for the CMF world, when I used to post it on a weekend. I didn't realise how many people until more recently. Well, over time, I realised how many people picked that up from there. So they weren't necessarily engaged with the hashtag on social media, because some of them didn't use social media, but they picked it up from the review, and that's why I've never been able to. I once tried to. I think for the 1000th year of the hashtag, which was several years ago, I guess, I tried to work out how many people perhaps connected to the hashtag, but the best I could come up with was only what was on the social media accounts. I don't know how wide it got, and actually that's fine, right? Because the aim was only ever really to help one person. But the review was an interesting thing, how it has, I don't know, had a life connect. It's kind of connected to the hashtag, but wider as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as I was sort of going to say, I mean, it is just such a wonderful resource. It's all still up there, I think, isn't it, and able to be looked at.
Yeah, the Flipboard has over 200 editions. If you want to, if you want to flick back through that, unfortunately, the ones on paper, like whatever it was called, that's now a defunct platform. That's gone, unfortunately, but
disappeared.
Flipboard, it's still there, and I will try and maintain that legacy. There's over 1,000 of the memes on Pinterest. I always forget about that.
Pinterest. I did not realize that. I'm not on Pinterest, so yes, 1,000 memes. I mean, they were one of my favorite bits, I must admit. You know, like the memes and the quotes from various people all around, and also the occasional famous person quote.
I used to love. I like doing those actually, because I probably was quite nervous the first time I did them, for sometimes, because like you're taking some of these words and you put an image, and but because it was yourself, there was Shelley Kurt doing it, Dennis. It was just any quotes. Somebody would just put something out. I think, oh, that's really good. That's really good.
Yeah.
And it would be fun for me to try and match the images. Sometimes there were humorous ones.
Yes.
Sometimes I would try to be more serious. I tried to always kind of avoid the someone sitting on the edge of a mountain looking extensively off into the into the horizon.
Yes,
Dogs featured quite a lot, if I remember
I was
correctly.
just going to say, I think I was trying to see if I could find it, but there was one great one the image that you used of the dog with the superhero cape. That was
Oh, the Superman app, yes.
yes, yeah. And lots of them. I mean, they were delightful. They were moving. They were kind of little things, little earworms in a way, just to kind of bring in the compassion and the self-compassion and little brief aphorisms and quotes and yeah, those were definitely some of my favourites. You also did the book club as well. That there was a few of those that you did that was cool.
So that was another thing that just happened.
Yeah.
So how that first started on Twitter, I forgot some of it. So actually, it was actually towards the end of 2018, so in that first year, Mary and I were having a chat, Mary Welford, and she said, could we do some kind of book club thing on Twitter? How could we do it? And so we did it with her CFT for Dummies, the first one. And what I did was I said, for this hour, we're going to meet. Mary and I will be on Twitter, obviously. So it was all keyboard, all text, no, and anyone can join in. And so I had about 4 or 5 questions that I would ask over the hour, and the author would reply with and then people could join in. So it was a very open kind of thing, and we did it on Twitter. I did it off and on then between 18 and 19. And we had lots of different people on. They were great fun. I mean, they could be quite challenging to keep up with because obviously you'd answer one question and somebody could join it. One of the reasons I quite like that platform for that though was that people could come back to it. You just suddenly get a comment a couple of days later, somebody had just seen it and said, "Oh, can I assist?" And it was great because the author could reply to it. It was accepted. This is for me. This was one of those things where the connection is brilliant because you've opened up the ability to go and ask Mary a question or Dennis Tershon. I had loads of people come on it. James did one for us on there. So that was the Twitter version of it, and then what year was that? Mary had contacted me to say, could we relook at doing the book club, but perhaps do it on a video format? So we did. So I'm trying to think what year was.
I think it must have been when they published
21. It was 21.
The kindness.
That's right.
Workbook?
Yeah. So we did that, which was so that switched to video, and of course it was COVID days as well, wasn't it, and all that stuff. So we did with Mary and Elaine for that, and then the following month, Your Good Self.
Yes, I remember that super fondly. I think I did my hair carefully that day.
Wonderful book, so that worked quite well, didn't it? That was on YouTube. They're on YouTube. Unfortunately, they're not connected to having you on as a guest. I had a bit of a fall down the stairs just after that, and I had a slight serious accident. I'm jokingly laughing about it when it was quite a serious accident. So I was laid up for a few months after that. So that kind of entered the stall on the book club, and then I did bring it back again, and that was 23, and the first guest on that was Darcy, and again it was going to be video format like we did with yourself, but I had some connection issues, so I kept freezing on the video and a few dropouts, and I couldn't. I tried to edit it, and I couldn't get this to edit, and I didn't think people really wanted to watch a video with me which seemed to be the face I seemed to be pulling when I was stuck. So I thought I would just turn it into an audio. I got the audio and I managed to edit the audio so the bits where I was kind of cutting out, it didn't affect it too much. And thankfully, most importantly, it hadn't really cut anything that Darcy said out, so that was great. You could hear it. So I thought, oh, okay, let's go for a podcast then. So I did that as an audio podcast, and then we did a few more. So Anne Parkinson, who's
Yes.
been a great support to the hashtag as well, because she helped me with some of the admin on Facebook. Lucy Maddox, and then James as well. Again, so James had a dual appearance on the book club, as it were. So they worked really well. But they again, I stuck with the audio format
I
because
see.
I could edit it and that stuff. So they are on YouTube as well now, because YouTube hosts everything, doesn't it? You can put podcasts on there as well.
That's
So
true.
again, to put it into
Yeah.
one space, I put all the bookcases, all the book clubs on there.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were good fun. They were good fun
Yeah.
to do as well.
Yeah.
A
No,
lot
I
of work,
think.
though. I do admire what you do with this, because it is a lot of work. It really gave me insight into regularly doing something.
Yes. Yeah, there's the sort of the prep and the kind of the reading of the book even and the kind of
Yeah,
thinking about some good questions, and then there's the recording and all the things that can sometimes go wrong and whatever, and then
yes,
there's the editing and yeah,
yeah.
it's a big thing, but I think that is a really great sort of offering too that you've had on the YouTube channel. You also have a few sort of video essays or talk to camera sort of episodes as well of different aspects of CFT. And
I do. Yeah, again, I'd almost forgot. I just not that I've forgotten about the.
you've been
But yeah,
prolific in
no,
a
that
way. I
was.
mean, you've done a lot of things.
Yeah, they were followed, I suppose, from the blog, because I always wanted to try and get. They were quite early on again. They were probably 2019, I think I did them. And one thing that I'd always felt when I was trying to explore CFT initially was, and I don't want to get anyone watching this, I don't want to get upset with what I'm about to say. There wasn't, I didn't think at the time there was as much readily available material as there is now. So for somebody in the position I was at, where I was a non-clinician, suffering with depression, and when I looked around on things like YouTube, there were some great talks by Paul, but they were long, because they were to conferences or something like that.
Mm.
There was and his books were there, and Mary CFT for Dummies is a very accessible book, and obviously just after that, I think Chris and Elaine produced the Compassionate Mind workbook. But I just found online there wasn't, because CFT isn't as well known as I think it should be, or as established, and perhaps it's more so now than it was back then. I didn't, I felt that there was a piece that might be more usefully done via some short videos, just to try and express elements of CFT. So what the three circles are, what the three flows are, and what kind of worked for me and what didn't. Well, not what didn't, but so, how do I use imagery? How do I use journaling, for example? So they were fun to do, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're great. I mean, it is interesting to think about the 8 year span since and how there has been a bit of an exponential dissemination in a way of CFT and all things compassion and
I think so.
self-compassion.
I think so. I think two things on that. I think one, compassion or self-compassion has got more attention in media society. Some of that's good and some of it's not so good. That's a topic for a different
Mm.
another episode.
Mm.
But I think so. I think there's an interest in that, and then I think yes, there's more accessible. All the stuff that you've done. I think there is more stuff that's available, and there's things like the apps that people are developing. So Chris and Elaine have got the app. I know James has got this app coming
Three.
along.
Yes.
The three circles model, which looks really good. So I think there has, and I think there's been a growth of there's several books that can mention
Yeah.
yourself, James. There's a number of books that have kind of explored stuff on this. I think there is more what I would call more accessible stuff.
Mm.
I think that's the challenge as well. Taking stuff that can be quite academic in some of it, its outlook, and then making it accessible. And I think there's a real, yes, I think there has been a shift towards that. Or not a shift, there's more of it available.
And I think you were a big part of that. Really, I think you both created stuff through your blogging and through your YouTubing and the book clubs and you know the sharing of memes and so on. And so you kind of created stuff, but you also, like I say, you really disseminated others' work as well in a very generous and very helpful way. I think it really helped us who were trying to, get things out there. I would be remiss not to give a grateful nod to the Chisi Awards, for example, which were a
Oh,
yearly.
the Chisi Awards. Yeah, yes. I forgot about. Well, they're kind of connected to the hashtag. They're not connected to the hashtag.
Yeah.
Yeah. They make me. Yes. Yeah. I'm laughing because the name comes from a nickname that a very good friend of mine who actually now lives not too far away from you on the other side of the world.
Oh,
But when we worked together, somebody sent me an email where they misspelled my name to Chisi or Kizzy,
yes.
and I don't know why. It just always makes me laugh. And so
Yes.
I came up with this. I came up with this idea of doing a mock awards, an award ceremony at the end of the year. And again,
Yes.
it was to reflect resources that I'd found very useful that year. So again, did the podcasts and YouTube and books and stuff like that. And then I
Yes.
did it the first year, and I kind of thought I didn't. It was very tongue in cheek, obviously the way. Well,
Playful.
no,
Playful.
it was playful, but there was a meaning behind
Absolutely. Yeah.
why I was doing it. And the reaction to the first year was really good. So I thought, okay, I'll do a second year.
It was great.
And then it became kind of connected to the hashtag. And yeah, it was just a way of kind of sharing the things that I thought were useful and that
Mm,
others might find helpful.
mm.
And it also turned into something that was really nice to be able to remember Lou Gardner, who quite a lot of people in the
Yes.
community knew as Act Auntie, who unfortunately passed away. But she was a really good friend, and they created the Lou Gardner Award for creative. I think that was around creativity because she was obviously so creative. She
Yes.
did so many great illustrations for ACT and CFT. So, but yeah, that was the awards were.
Mm.
I used to get very nervous about those because I used to,
Me
I
too. I
can't
was.
miss.
I was. I was nervous in anticipation. um,
But
but also.
the feedback on that was always so great. It just
Oh,
encouraged me to do it.
yeah, no, that was fun, like it had a deeper purpose and a kind of and sort of acknowledging things and so on, but it was also just fun and humorous, like you're funny and you write in a way that is thoroughly amusing and fun, but also I was lucky enough to be the recipient of certain Chisi Awards, and I like to
Good
say
work. Good
Kissy
work.
because I feel like Kissy makes me
I'll go with
feel
that as
an
well. I'll go with
affection
that.
towards you. but uh,
Well,
but yes, I think
I always love the fact that Ross McIntosh with his I Love People Soup, his podcast. He started saying because he's one, so he always says that People Soup is an award-winning podcast, and I love that.
exactly. That's actually not. That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Yes, he was. We vied. The Compassion Initiative podcast used to vie with the People Soup to for
You
these.
did. It was a, yeah, yeah.
Mm,
Yes, it would depend if James mentioned mint ice cream, which might swing that because
yes,
he's got this strange thing about mint ice cream, hasn't he? And I
he
have a thing
does.
about that it's wrong. Um,
Yes. Yeah, no, it's he's a complex individual, old James. I mean, the other thing too that I did love your book quotes, and Terry Pratchett is you're a big fan there. Here's one of his quotes: "There isn't a way things should be done. There's just what happens and what we do." Tell us a little bit about that. What's that mean for you?
I think that's is that Nanny Og? I think that's Nanny Og that said that. So Pratchett was a big influence on me. Partly because I'm a fantasy geek, which is where he first started. And he was kind of taking his first books was taking a gentle Mickey take of those, but then they evolved into something else. And to me, he's one of the great writers of human insight. And there's so many quotes he does about the human nature, about our ways that we see the world. That means, I mean, to me, that quote is. I suppose in certain respects, it sums up why the hashtag is. It's just things are. That's the way that it happened. It evolved some kind of connection, community, unexpectedly, but rather delightfully, kind of created around that. I think as I say, I am quite logical. I am quite a planner. But the hashtag was actually quite nice around that because I didn't plan it. Yes, I put the organisation, obviously I put steps in to think about the review, but there was no plan. And it's probably, one of the things I've learned through this therapy experience, I suppose. And the hashtag and kind of this is that you can plan as much as you like, but actually sometimes it's how things are and they will evolve. You might have to give a little nudge to something along, like being a little bit protective of the hashtag. But it's allowed things to happen. And to me, this is a part of compassion actually as well. It's you have an intention with compassion. It's one of the big things for me out of CFT is this intention. That goes back to social media. And in fact, I was listening yesterday to your AI episode.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And you said something in there actually, which resonated with me. Where if you swap the word AI out for social media, it's a tool, right? And it's how you use it. And that to me is that key thing. That goes back to your earlier question about what made this a safe haven. What is my intention? And I'm a big fan of the psychologist author Elaine Gaskett. She's written 2 books about how we use social media. What actually one's about. One's actually about the digital legacy that we all leave behind when we sadly pass away, and what happens to that, and how social media can continue people's lives even when they've passed away. But a second book actually is all about how you use social media, and it's like you said about AI. It's not going to go away. So how do I use it? What's the intention behind this? And I think come back to that quote. It's how things are. So social media or these platforms can be toxic, and I think they've probably got to an extent they got more toxic, but that isn't. I think it's very easy to say that's the platform's fault. They do have a responsibility, and there is a difference between real life and social media in terms of the use of bots and deliberate misinformation being put out by groups. However, I think if we users of the platform come to it with the intention, right, what's the post I'm doing? Is it why is it to help? Is it to help somebody? It's the same with replies. When somebody puts a harmful reply on something, what's the point? What are you actually adding? What does this help? But that's the way things are. But you have to, you work within that.
It matters what we do. Yeah, I think that's so good. It's motivation or motives are so key. The social mentality theory and the motives and motivations that we think about in CFT, and I suppose that's a little bit what you're mentioning there is the suffering is a part of life, and and at the same time it matters what we do and choose, and the motives behind that. And I suppose the Terry Pratchett sort of quote kind of in really plain language just speaks to that. It isn't a way there isn't a way things should be. There's just what happens and then what we do. It's sort of profound.
Yes, and it's what we and I think there's a lot of things that Pratchett wrote about that I think are so true about this. He wrote about the fact that when you start to use people as tools, they stop being human beings. It's he had a real insight, and I think you're right. It's about there is almost a kind of that whole thing about it is what it is, and a lot of his books about the stories that we tell ourselves as well. So Nanny Og, who I mentioned, for those who don't know the stories, is kind of this wonderfully grumpy witch. She's kind of the main witch. Does she use magic or does she not? She uses something called headology, where it's in people. So she'll present herself as a witch. So if somebody comes to her for some wise information, she might say we do this, but she reveals that's because they'll then think that they've had magic and it'll help them. And I'm not really explaining this for her, but to me, it is about the storytelling. Pratchett's books about the stories we tell ourselves, and I think that has a big element within our mental well-being and
yeah,
the stories that we tell ourselves about events.
And the different parts, I guess, that sometimes we think about too in CFT, the different parts and the different stories. I guess I was wondering, you kind of alluded to your own lived experience, your depression, and that in a way, all of this really arose from that. In a way, this is kind of the growth that came from that experience and the people you met along the way and so on. But how did you sort of balance the lived experience with what is a sort of a busy role as a sort of a leader, to be frank? I mean, I know you're too humble to hear a word like that probably, but to be a bit of a something of a leader or a champion in this compassion community, how did you balance those various bits?
Leader is a it's funny because whenever I hear that, it's a word that I'm struggling with that word. But I always have. So I was, back at work, I was in a very senior leadership role. I had a few hundred people working for me, different contracts. I was never saw myself as that.
Yeah.
I think I was thinking about this. So one thing that there have been times during that period when I've been up and down, and I'm not, I would want no one to think that I had a few, I've cracked depression or I've cracked this handling difficult emotions or whatever. So when those lower periods or more challenging, or when I've had stuff on outside, like with house moving, for example, I've learned to just go, do you know what, actually, I never wanted, one thing I always promised myself as the hashtag became a bit more than just an idea, was that the moment it felt like work, I would stop it. The moment I felt it became a burden that I had to do something, I had to do a daily post, was when something had gone wrong on it, if you like, or it wasn't, I needed to look at it. And I have to say, I've never felt actually that level of that kind of burden. I did with the blog at one time, my personal blog, which is why that kind of stopped, because I felt like I was having to write something each week. And in the end, I kind of thought, now I'm just putting something out because I've got to do it. I feel like I need to do it. So with the hashtag, I developed, and it wasn't easy to say, actually, I'm just going to take a pause. And what made that helpful to address that kind of lived experience part was I would probably share it, actually. Oh, I'm struggling at the minute, so I'm going to take a few days off. And I always got great support.
Yes.
Which always takes me back. It still takes me back now, even if sometimes I go, oh, look, I'm going to take a few days off, or I won't post for a week or whatever. And I think the first time it really hit why that was, why that actually was important, apart from myself saying this is important, was that somebody put, yeah, you should take the time off. Thank you for modelling. a compassionate approach to yourself. And I hadn't thought
Yes.
of it necessarily in that way. I was kind of apologising. I'm sorry, I would be taking some time away. And people actually respected that and were supportive, and so that always gave me the ability, if you like, or the feeling to be able to say, actually, I'll step away and take a break from that,
Yes.
or take a break from the daily stuff, and that I think that comes back to this sense of community. People understood that, and so, but actually, just the sharing of it as well. I think if I look back across some of the, say, for example, the music, music is a big part of my of me. I guess I love music. I can usually tell by what music I'm listening to where my mood is going. or,
Yes.
you know, so I have all these little kind of ways, the awareness. I think this is one of the big things that CFT gives you, is just that a bit more awareness of what might be going on. And then the second part of it, obviously, is the intention to say, well, actually, I need to take a bit of time out.
Mm.
So I think that's probably one of the ways that would help to sustain, to make it sustainable.
Yeah. That just actually the idea of boundaries in a way has come up a couple of times. One was the boundaries around, having certain rules for the hashtag and perhaps not sharing certain things that were inappropriate. I mean, that's just good, healthy boundaries. And this is too, isn't it? Really is a sort of, and this is where, boundaries are really tricky because we often have to set them for ourselves. And so, that's the hard bit, but you did. And actually, it really is an interesting point there that we can be champions of compassion and self-compassion in lots of different ways. And one way is to kind of model those things and sort of show the, not to show it, but just to be it, to live it, and to sort of bring that compassion to ourselves. You've decided to bring this particular chapter to a close, and you actually didn't. Yeah, a moment ago, or a bit earlier, you said that close might not be quite the right word. I guess I'm curious to hear how you would sort of really describe it. I think
can't let it go.
at least in terms of the regular postings and the reviews, I think your idea is to just the community be somewhat self-sustaining, I guess. But yeah, what led to that decision, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, there is there is no straight answer in certain respects, in that, like, to why does, I don't want to say ended or closed because they're not the right words.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is. Pause, not in pause.
it's not really pause, no.
No, the reflect, the hashtag. I said it. I never wanted to feel that way, and he never has, and that's not been part of this. I think during last year, we had quite a bit of a pause, actually, because we moved house, and because we were having some minor building work done. I just didn't have much time, so I think I was off for about almost a month. I can't remember. And it was one of the few times that when I have paused, I was thinking, oh, I don't want this to sound wrong. I didn't notice the pull back to come and do look. Normally, when I did do a pause, I'd still feel quite nervous sometimes, or anxious. I need to go back and do something for the hashtag. I didn't feel that, and I think it's perhaps partly my journey, part of my kind of evolution, as it were, with CFT, or with
Yes.
myself. I don't know. With studying CFT, because I'm in parallel to all this, I've done my psychology degree as well. So,
Yes.
it just felt that towards the end of last year, I felt like, okay, the hashtag, I can kind of let this go, but I don't want it to let it go. I can, and I think that led me to the decision to go, look, why don't you switch it to monthly? So I made the reviews monthly at the end of 24. I think that was partly me not wanting to kind of go, actually, I'm going to finish the hashtag at the end of 24. or stop the regular postings. I think I thought, okay, just not. Why don't you go on it with doing irregular postings? Do the monthly and see how you feel about it. I kind of think that was me just slightly wanting to see if I could keep it going. And then I kind of felt, actually, no, this is a stage where go. But the reason I don't want to say closed is I'm still going to post things occasionally. In fact, the other day I was going to post something. And I know you've posted something, and Parkinson's recently posted a few things. There's a couple of people have. That's great, because I'd like that to continue, actually. It doesn't have to be regular, but if people still see something and they want to share that, it's a hashtag. Perfect. I'm not going to do the reviews of that, but it would be lovely if people continued to post to it. So I don't want to say it's closed, because it's got the legacy element of it as well. So the YouTube, the flipboards, actually the community blog. I keep forgetting about the community blog as well. So people wrote some great little blogs on there as well. So it's got a legacy that's still there. I don't know as well. Who knows? I might suddenly pop up and go, do you know what? Let's do some daily posting again. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd like it to continue as a thing. It's out there. It has been out there for several years, but it's out there now, and it's just self-sustaining. That's I think the phrase you used. I quite like that idea, actually.
Yeah. Well, the phrase that keeps coming to mind is, it's almost like you're now sort of releasing it into its natural environment or something. That it can just.
Yeah. I think of it like a child, which actually it probably was, because I was very protective of it in the early days, and it's kind of like, okay.
Yeah, no, I think so.
Go off.
It's sort of fly and be free, and in a way, it maybe it can be self-sustaining, and I guess that's a kind of nice thing, just to maybe to kind of get out there with people, is that I think what you're saying is that people needn't sort of hesitate about posting on there. That obviously there are certain basic kind of expectations, but if someone has something to share about compassion, it sounds like you would be welcoming for people to share on the Facebook page or whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not finished. I mean, part of me doesn't like the fact that the logical part of me doesn't like the fact that I didn't end it at the end. It's dreadful, because ending it kind of, when it was at April time, March, April, halfway, partly through it feels wrong. Part of me has really been wrestling with that.
Yes,
but and I'm also very aware that I've come on a journey with CFT and compassion, and there's been lots of elements to that. There's from the therapy, the hashtag, what I've learned from being in a more academic approach to it as well. But I do realise for some people that's not where they're not on that same. There are different stages within that. So if I give an example to illustrate that, the other day I was a few weeks ago, I was on an online book club. It's nature-based book club, and you were asked to recommend a book. So I'd recommended. But there was only a few people on the call, so we got more time. So they said, "Well, let's go around again." And it doesn't have to be a nature book, and somebody started talking about a book about self-esteem and stuff. And I went, "Oh, right, okay. If we're going down the well-being route," so I started talking about various compassion books and Paul's work. And I think there's 4 or 5 people on the call. No one had really heard about it. And they were, I suddenly realised again, it was one of those moments where people were like, Paul, they're busy writing the name down and a book title. And I've got 3 flags. This sounds really interesting. And I was suddenly thinking, oh yeah, I have to remember. I think when you do get close to some of this stuff, you sometimes forget that other people aren't in it. Well, sometimes other people aren't into it as much as you are. And secondly, they may not know about it as much. And that was just one of those moments again. So I know there are people within the hashtag community who've been from it day one. There are some people who've only just come into it. And I am very aware that, hopefully that those people who've just come into it or discover it later on can look back at some of the legacy stuff, and it helps them along the various parts of where they are with it.
Yeah, no, I think that all makes complete sense. And I think people generally feel super grateful for, what you've done, to be honest, and 8 years and really still going, I suppose. It's in the name, 365 days of compassion. So it's sort of, it keeps going, and it's been a very supportive, generous, loving community, which I think it's touched so many people, and I'm not sure if you sort of need to be told, but like it's something to be really proud of, I think, and to feel good about, and a very meaningful contribution. In the words of Tolkien, the world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places, but still there is much that is fair. And though in all the lands love is now mingled with grief, it grows perhaps the greater. And so, Chris Winson, we will feel some sadness at the change, but it's just a change. It's just an evolution. And so
I think
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for all that you've done with 365 Days of Compassion. And thank you for speaking with me on Compassion in a T-shirt.
That's been a treat. Thank you so much, Dan. That's brilliant. And I love the fact we're on a Tolkien quote. Brilliant.
Well, we started on one, and so I thought we should end on one.
we almost planned it.